Welcome back, my wolves. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop your location in the comments. I want to know where you're listening from tonight. This story is mine. My name is Mirabelle, and for 5 years I've been running from a fate I believed would break me. I poisoned myself with wolfsbane and bitter herbs, living like a phantom in the borderlands to escape the brutal claiming rituals that haunt my nightmares. But on the winter solstice, my body betrayed me. The heat struck without warning, a wildfire that burned through every defense I'd built. Alpha King Kingsley, the one man whose voice alone makes my knees weak, caught my scent on the frozen wind. I ran into the winter forest, praying the cold would hide me. Instead, I stumbled into his private hunting lodge, sealing my fate with every desperate step. And when he walked through that door, snow melting in his dark braided hair, his golden eyes locked onto mine with a hunger that made my wolf whimper. He moved toward me with devastating certainty and spoke the words that shattered my world. You can't hide from me anymore. Will I survive the king who refuses to let me go? Or will I finally discover that surrender is the truest freedom? The first thing I noticed was the silence. For 5 years, that silence had been my shield. No scent, no heat, no slip in control. Just the steady bitterness of wolfsbane burning down my throat every dawn, turning my blood into something dull and uninteresting. Tonight, that silence cracked. It started as a tremor behind my ribs, a low, unfamiliar warmth spinning slow circles through my veins. I was grinding the last of the dried roots in my mortar when the pestle slipped from my fingers. My hand was shaking, not from cold, from something molten. I stared at the paste, thick and black and reeking of poison, my salvation, my prison. The fumes curled up into my face, but instead of masking me, the smell made my stomach twist. My wolf stirred, a faint rustle at the edge of my mind, like claws dragging over stone. No. I grabbed the bowl, forced it to my lips. The first swallow scorched my tongue, familiar and cruel. I waited for the numbness, the dulling. It didn't come. The warmth in my chest flared instead, bright and hot, racing down my spine in a shivering ribbon. My wolf lifted her head. She hadn't moved in years. I had buried her under layers of poison and fear until she lay silent, barely breathing. Now, she yawned awake, stretching through my bones with slow, predatory delight. Mine, she whispered. The word wasn't sound. It was instinct, vibrating through the marrow of me. My fingers tightened around the bowl until it shattered, shards biting into my palm. The bitter paste splattered across the table and onto the floor, useless. Heat rolled through me. No longer a slow burn, but a rising tide. My skin prickled. My throat went dry. I could feel my pulse everywhere in my wrists, my neck, between my thighs thick and heavy and wrong. Not now, I rasped, staggering back from the table. Please, not now. The cabin spun. The small one-room space, usually my safe little cage, felt too small to hold the pressure building inside me. The air seemed thicker, warmer, scented with something unfamiliar. It took me a second to realize it was me, a hint of my own scent, faint but undeniable, curling through the room like smoke. Wildflowers after rain, moonlit frost. The scent I had spent 5 years murdering. Panic clawed up my throat. If I could smell it, any alpha within miles could too. I stumbled toward the narrow window and shoved it open. Winter wind slammed into me, a slap of ice that stole my breath. Snow blew in, sharp and wild, but it couldn't cut through the fever spreading beneath my skin. The cold used to sink into my bones within seconds. Tonight, it barely grazed me. My wolf pushed harder, pacing now, tail high. Heat, need, mate. Shut up, I hissed, pressing my forehead to the frozen pain. The glass burned against my overheated skin. We don't need anyone, we just need the herbs. We just need... The next wave hit like lightning. My knees buckled. I caught the edge of the windowsill, knuckles white. Fire exploded in my core, flooding outward until my fingertips tingled. Sweat broke across my skin despite the freezing air. My breath came in ragged gasps, fogging the glass. This was no ordinary heat. I'd seen it once before. The memory tore itself open before I could push it away. The old ceremonial hall. The smell of incense and blood. I was younger then, barely more than a girl, hiding behind a cracked pillar with my hands clamped over my mouth. On the platform, an Omega knelt, shackled at wrists and ankles, her eyes glassy with fever. Her scent was everywhere, sweet and desperate, clinging to the wooden beams, thick enough to choke on. Around her, alphas circled like wolves around a dying deer. The pack's elders watched with cold eyes, their hands folded as if this were a prayer instead of a punishment. The chosen alpha stepped forward, lips curled in a satisfied smile, and the Omega sobbed. She said no. I heard it. A broken, hoarse plea. Heard the way they ignored it. Her heat had made her a resource, not a person. When he grabbed her, it wasn't a mating. It was a sentence. I remembered the sound of her scream when his teeth sank into her neck, the way her body bowed under him as the crowd cheered. My wolf had howled that day, furious and helpless. That night, I stole my first handful of wolfsbane and swallowed it until my vision blurred. I would never be that helpless. Never. Now, 5 years later, my body was dragging me straight toward the same edge. No, I whispered to the empty cabin. I won't let you do this to me. Another wave of heat surged. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I collapsed onto the narrow bed, clutching the thin blanket in my fists. My scent thickened, sweet and undeniable, winding through the room like a beacon. My wolf pressed against my mind, not cruel, just desperate. Mate, need, ours. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood. The walls felt closer with every breath. Somewhere out there, in the snow-drowned forest, alphas would be lifting their heads, catching the faintest curl of what I was. One of them was worse than all the others. Kingsley. Even thinking his name sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the heat. Alpha King, ruler of the northern packs. His presence at gatherings had always turned the air electric, his power a weight that pressed everyone to their knees. My wolf had recognized him the first time we saw him, her entire being leaning toward him with blind, foolish hunger. Mine, she had whispered then too. I had swallowed more poison that night than ever before. If he caught this scent, if he realized what I was, what I'd been hiding there would be no running, no borderlands, no cabin, just a throne room, and a crown and a mark I hadn't chosen. The thought snapped something in me. I lurched off the bed, staggering toward the door. The room blurred, edges sharp and bright at the same time. My boots felt heavy, my hands clumsy as I snatched my cloak from its peg and threw it over my shoulders. The wool scratched my too sensitive skin, but I forced my arms through the sleeves. Get out, get away, before someone finds you. The door groaned as I yanked it open. Night wind slammed into me, filled with snow and the metallic sting of distant pine. The blast stole some of the heat, but not enough. I stepped into the storm anyway. Snow swallowed my ankles instantly. The forest beyond my cabin was a blur of skeletal trees and whirling white. No path, no plan, just a way. I pulled my hood up, lowered my head and walked. Every step hurt. The heat inside me and the cold outside me waged war in my veins. My breath came harsh and uneven, white plumes torn away by the wind. My scent streamed behind me. I could feel it, like a glowing trail only wolves could see. My wolf didn't care. She pressed forward, drawn to something ahead, something powerful and familiar. Kingsley? She whispered again, reverent. I shoved her back with a snarl. I said no. Branches clawed at my cloak, snapping under my weight. I had no idea how long I walked. Minutes, hours. Time twisted around the fever, turning into one long, stumbling step. I fell once, my palms plunging into the snow. It should have frozen my skin. Instead, steam curled faintly around my fingers. I pushed myself up and kept going. When the shape rose out of the storm, I almost thought it was a hallucination. A structure loomed ahead, massive and dark against the swirling white. Not a cabin, not a hunter's shack. This was bigger stone and timber built into the side of a hill, its roof heavy with snow. Thick columns framed a wide porch, and iron lanterns hung unlit at the entrance. A lodge, a royal one, if the quality of the wood and the carving on the door meant anything. Every instinct told me to turn around. A place like this belonged to someone dangerous, someone important, someone who would not appreciate a feverish Omega collapsing on their floor. But my legs had nothing left. My vision narrowed, black spots dancing at the edges. The heat inside me roared, a furnace devouring the last of my strength. My wolf was a distant, urgent hum. Inside, safe, go. I dragged myself up the steps, fingers numb as I fumbled with the iron handle. To my surprise, the door wasn't locked. It swung inward with a low groan, exhaling a wave of air that smelled like old wood, ash, and leather. I stepped over the threshold and nearly went to my knees. Warmth washed over me. Not from a fire, there was only a bed of cold ashes in the hearth, but from thick, tightly sealed walls that held out the storm. The interior was large, shadows pooling in the corners, heavy furniture outlined by the faint light sneaking in through frost-coated windows. My cloak slipped from my shoulders. I didn't have the strength to catch it. I staggered forward a few more steps, boots leaving wet footprints on the polished floor. Then my body simply gave up. I crumpled beside a rug, cheek pressed to its rough weave, chest heaving. The last thought that flickered through my half-conscious mind was a prayer. Let this place stay empty. Let whoever owns it never come back. Darkness pulled at me, soft and heavy. I let my eyes close, the sound of my own racing heartbeat filling my ears. Then, through the storm and the walls and the thick haze of my fever, I heard it. Heavy boots, steady and sure, landing on the porch outside. The door exploded open on a gust of snow and night. I flinched, instinct dragging me upright faster than my fevered body could handle. The room tilted, a smear of shadows and gray light, and then he was there filling the doorway like the storm had carved him out of ice and fury and sent him inside. Kingsley. I had seen him before, at a distance, on balconies and in courts where everyone bowed so low their foreheads nearly brushed the stone. But none of those glimpses prepared me for the shock of him standing just a few feet away, framed by the blizzard, his dark braided hair soaked with melting snow, water running in thin lines down the angles of his jaw. His golden eyes found me instantly. They glowed, predatory and bright, locking onto my crumpled form on the floor. Power rolled off him in quiet waves, pressing against my overheated skin. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but my legs were nothing but trembling sticks. My back hit the wall anyway, palms scraping against the wood as I tried to push myself farther away, as if I could disappear into the logs. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. He didn't look surprised to find an intruder in his lodge. He looked stunned, as if some impossible puzzle had suddenly clicked into place. His nostrils flared, and I saw the exact moment my scent hit him. The air changed. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold in molten black. His shoulders rose with a sharp inhale, snow-laced cloak shifting over armor. Every line of his body went tight, the way a wolf's does when it sights prey or something more dangerous. My wolf, who had been pacing in the back of my mind since the heat began, dropped to her belly with a low, shivering whine. Mate. I swallowed hard, throat like sandpaper. Stay back. My voice came out cracked and small. Pathetic. I hated the sound of it. Hated the way my fingers shook where they pressed against the wall. Hated most of all the way my body responded to him, traitorous and hungry, the heat inside me surging higher just because he was breathing the same air. He took a step forward. I pressed myself harder against the wood, as if I could pass straight through. I mean it, I rasped. Don't touch me. Instead of snapping, instead of baring his teeth or letting his alpha command roll over me, he did something I didn't expect. He went still. The storm howled behind him, flinging knives of snow through the open door, but he didn't move. He watched me, eyes sharp but strangely cautious, like he was approaching a wounded animal instead of a trespassing omega radiating heat. When he spoke, his voice was nothing like the booming authority I remembered from the court. Are you hurt? The question was simple, but it slid under my skin like a blade. Gentle, careful, completely wrong for the man everyone feared. I blinked, thrown. What? He tipped his head slightly, braids swinging. Droplets of water fell from the ends to the floor. I smelled blood. His gaze flicked to my palm, where thin red lines from the broken bowl still marred my skin. Are you hurt? He repeated, quieter this time. The fever made my thoughts slow, but confusion cut through it. He was focusing on that? On a few scratches when my entire body felt like it was on fire? I'm fine, I lied. Just leave. I'll go. I didn't know this place was yours. Something flickered across his face at that. Everyone in the northern Pax knows this lodge is mine. His eyes narrowed, studying me. Which means you're either very foolish or very desperate. I didn't answer. Both were true. The scent between us thickened, my heat wrapping around him like unseen smoke. I could see the effect it had on him, the way his throat bobbed, the way the muscles in his jaw jumped. His wolf prowled just beneath the surface of his skin, pressing against the edges of his control. He still didn't move. The restraint shook me more than any threat could have. "Look at me, little wolf," he murmured. I should have refused. I should have kept my gaze on the floor, on the door, on anywhere but him. Instead, my eyes lifted of their own accord, meeting his. Whatever I expected to find there, cold calculation, smug satisfaction, the greedy hunger I'd seen in other alphas when they scented an omega in heat, it wasn't this. He looked wrecked. Not by me, not exactly, but by something older and deeper. There was a kind of aching wonder in his stare, like he was looking at a miracle he'd given up believing in and was almost afraid to touch in case it vanished. "Gods," he breathed, more to himself than to me. "It's you." My lungs stuttered. "I'm no one." His lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was too raw for that. "You're burning alive on my floor, smelling like moonlight and first snow, and you broke into my sanctuary on the one night I swore I'd be alone." His gaze dipped to my trembling hands, then back to my face. "That does not feel like no one." The room spun again. The heat had become a living thing, clawing at my insides. My knees wobbled. He noticed. In an instant, the predator was gone, or at least hidden. Something softer slid into place. His posture eased. He lifted both hands slowly, palms empty, like he was approaching a frightened pup. "I'm going to come closer," he said quietly. "Not to hurt you, not to take what you haven't given. I just..." His throat worked. "You're too hot. You'll collapse." Too late, I thought, but my tongue was heavy and useless. The wall behind me was the only reason I was still upright. He took a careful step, then another, each footfall silent despite his size. When he was close enough that I could feel his body heat shockingly cooler than mine, I caught his scent fully. Pine and leather, cold iron from his armor, and underneath, something old and wild, like midnight wind over mountain stone. My wolf rolled onto her back and purred. "Traitor." The scent wrapped around me, soothing and intoxicating all at once. My muscles, locked for so long, loosened without my permission. My head tipped back against the wall, a broken sound slipping past my lips. He stopped a breath away. "Mirabelle," he said, and hearing my name in his voice nearly dropped me. I hadn't told him that. "How?" "I've known your name longer than you've known mine," he said softly. "You disappeared 5 years ago, a ghost at the edges of my borders. I've chased your scent through empty cabins and abandoned camps until I thought I'd imagined you." His eyes shuddered for a moment, pain flickering through the gold. "And now you're here, in my lodge, barely able to stand." My heart hammered so hard it hurt. "I didn't come for you. I know." His gaze swept my face, lingering at the damp hair clinging to my temples, the fever-bright glassiness in my eyes. "You came because you're out of options." Tears burned behind my eyes. I hated that he could see straight through me. He lowered himself then. Not closer, not crowding me, but down. He bent his knees and sank into a crouch until we were almost eye level. For a king who could have towered over me, it was a shocking thing to watch. Power lowering itself on purpose. He rested his forearms lightly on his thighs, hands still open, fingers relaxed. "May I help you, Mirabelle?" The words didn't make sense. "You're the Alpha King," I whispered. "You don't ask." His mouth twisted. "I do with you." Something splintered in my chest, a crack where years of iron certainty had lived. I felt suddenly unsteady in a different way, as if one wrong breath would topple all the walls I'd built. My wolf pressed into that crack, hopeful and bright. "Say yes," she urged. "Please." "I don't." My voice shook. "I don't trust alphas." "I don't blame you," he said immediately. His jaw clenched, as if the admission cost him. "I've seen what they do. What we do. I won't be another monster in your story." I stared at him, unsure if I hated him more for saying exactly what I needed to hear, or for meaning it. The fever pulsed under my skin, each heartbeat a wave of molten pressure. Dots danced at the edges of my vision again. "Please," he murmured, "you're burning. Let me help." It was the please that destroyed me. Kingsley did not beg. Kingsley commanded armies and silenced rooms with a look. Yet here he was, crouched in front of a shaking Omega who had broken into his home, asking permission like it mattered. For the first time in years, someone with claws sharp enough to tear me apart wasn't reaching for my throat. He was offering his hands instead. "Yes," I heard myself whisper, barely audible. "Just don't hurt me." His eyes closed for a fraction of a second. relief flashing across his features so fierce it almost looked like pain. When he opened them again, the gold burned brighter. "Never," he said. He moved then, but even his urgency was careful. One arm slid behind my back, the other beneath my knees. The touch was shockingly gentle, as if he thought I might shatter. Heat flared where his skin met mine, but it was a different kind from the fever, a grounding, steady warmth that soothed instead of devoured. The world tilted as he lifted me. I gasped, instinctively clutching at his shoulders. The leather of his armor was cold under my fingers, his body solid and unyielding beneath it. He held me like I weighed nothing, cradled against his chest, my cheek brushing the damp edge of one of his braids. Up close, his scent was overwhelming. Pine, leather, that deep ancient note that made my wolf hum with contentment. My muscles, still tensed for violence, found none. His grip was firm, but there was no greed in it, only care. He carried me across the room to the wide bed I'd barely noticed before collapsing. The mattress dipped as he lowered me onto it, one hand staying at the small of my back until he was sure I was steady. Even then, he hesitated, as if pulling away might hurt me. "I'll be right back," he murmured. "Don't move." "As if I could," I muttered, the words slurring with exhaustion. He huffed out a soft, startled sound that might have been a laugh. Then he was gone, crossing to a side table where a basin and pitcher sat. I watched through half-lidded eyes as he poured water, grabbed a clean cloth, and returned. The first touch of the cool, damp fabric to my forehead made me sigh. The fever had turned my skin into a furnace. The cloth was a mercy I hadn't known to ask for. He smoothed it gently along my hairline, thumb barely grazing my temple. "Too hot," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "You've pushed your body too far." "You don't know me," I said weakly. His hand paused, then resumed its slow, careful path. He ran the cloth down the side of my neck, over the frantic beat of my pulse, never straying lower than my collarbone. "I know enough," he said. "I know you've been poisoning yourself to stay hidden. I've smelled the wolfsbane on your abandoned cups. I know you're stubborn enough to run into a storm rather than ask for help." His gaze met mine. "And I know the moon wouldn't have brought you to my door if you weren't meant to be here." The gentleness in his eyes was worse than any command. It made something fragile inside me ache. He refreshed the cloth, this time trailing it along my forearms, avoiding the shallow cuts on my palm with careful precision. Every touch was reverent, as if my skin were something sacred. No one had ever touched me like that. My eyelids grew heavier. The combination of cool water, steady hands, and his scent wrapping around me like a blanket dragged me toward sleep. My wolf curled closer, content for the first time in years. I felt the mattress dip as he sat on the edge, still tending to me even as my consciousness frayed. The cloth moved one last time across my brow, then his fingers replaced it, calloused pads tracing lightly along my hairline. I should have been afraid. Instead, with my defenses falling piece by piece, all I felt was safe. It terrified me in a different way. As darkness pulled at me, I heard him lean closer. His breath brushed the shell of my ear, warm and shaky, like he was barely holding himself together. "I've been waiting for you," Kingsley whispered. The words followed me down into the dark, burning hotter than the fever ever could. The world narrowed to heat and the steady weight of him around me. At some point after he whispered that he'd been waiting, the fever surged again, dragging me up out of the thin, restless sleep I'd fallen into. It didn't come gently this time. It hit like a wave breaking over my head, stealing my breath, turning my limbs into molten lead. My back arched off the mattress, a broken sound tearing from my throat. In an instant, his hands were on me. "Easy," Kingsley murmured, voice rough with worry. "I've got you, little wolf. Breathe." I didn't remember when he'd climbed fully into the bed, only that now his body was pressed along the length of mine, solid and cool against my burning skin. One arm banded around my waist, the other cradled the back of my head, keeping me from thrashing. His chest rose and fell against my ribs, each steady inhale a rhythm for my own. "It hurts," I rasped, fingers twisting in his tunic. "Too hot." "I know." His lips brushed my temple, not quite a kiss. "Let me take some of it. Let me ground you." His scent surrounded me, pine, leather, that ancient wild note, and slowly, slowly, the panic loosened its claws. The fire didn't vanish, but it stopped feeling like it would burn me from the inside out. My wolf pressed closer, purring as his power wrapped around us like a shield. For a while we just breathed. Wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Inside, the only light came from the embers he'd coaxed back to life in the hearth. They painted the room in a low orange glow, shadows dancing over the ceiling, gilding the edges of his profile when I tilted my head to look at him. His eyes, usually so sharp, were soft in the firelight, the gold dimmed to amber. There was a tightness around his mouth, a furrow between his brows, like keeping control cost him more than he wanted me to see. "This would be easier if you weren't fighting yourself," he said quietly. "I'm not." His gaze flicked to mine, and whatever lie I'd been about to tell withered on my tongue. "You're trying to hold the bond at arm's length," he murmured. "I feel it, like you've braced every part of yourself against me." "I have." My voice came out more honest than I intended. The fever stripped away my usual caution, leaving the truth bare and raw. "I don't know how not to." He didn't answer, just tightened his arm around my waist, pulling me that last inch so there was no space between us. Skin to skin where my tunic had ridden up, the contrast of his cooler body against my heat making my nerves spark. "Tell me why you ran," he said, barely above a whisper. "Not from this cabin, from me, from all of us." I could have pretended not to understand, but his heart was beating against my cheek, steady and patient, waiting. That, more than anything, undid me. "You really want to know?" I asked. "I've wanted to know for 5 years." The words settled over me like another blanket. 5 years of chasing a ghost, he'd said earlier. 5 years of catching traces of wolfsbane and empty camps. Never me. I swallowed, my throat suddenly tight. "It started with a girl," I said. "An Omega from my old pack." He didn't move, but I felt him listening, every muscle tuned to my voice. "I was 16, I went on, eyes fixed on the ceiling. She was older, pretty, soft-spoken. The kind of Omega everyone said was lucky because the alphas noticed her. The memory rose vivid and sharp, the incense, the candles, the feel of stone beneath my bare feet as I crept down the hall, drawn by the sound of muffled sobbing. "They called it a ceremony," I whispered. Said the moon had blessed her with a powerful mate. They dressed it up with flowers and silk and vows. My stomach turned, but when I looked past the pretty words, all I saw was a girl shaking so hard she could barely stand. My hands curled into his tunic. He let me. "They locked the doors," I said. "Made everyone watch." The elders smiling, saying this was our destiny. The alpha they'd chosen for her looked at her like something he'd already paid for. My voice broke. I forced myself to keep going. "She said no, Kingsley," over and over, and no one cared. The fire popped in the hearth, a sharp crack that made me flinch. "I watched him drag her to her knees," I whispered. "Watched her beg. Watched them hold her down when the heat made her too weak to fight. And when he bit her, when she screamed so loud the candles shook, the elders called it beautiful." A bitter laugh scraped out of me. "They told us that was love. That was what awaited all of us." His fingers flexed on my hip, just once. The only sign he was hearing every word like a blade. "I went home that night and stole wolfsbane from the healer's stores," I said. "I mixed it with tea and drank until I puked. The next morning my scent was duller. The elders called me defective, said my wolf was weak." I swallowed. I let them believe it, because if they thought I was broken, they wouldn't parade me in front of alphas like livestock. Mirabelle. I kept drinking it. I cut in, afraid if I stopped I'd never start again. Day after day, year after year. I watched those ceremonies from the shadows, watched girls I'd grown up with turned into possessions, and I promised myself I would never stand on that platform. My eyes burned. So when they finally noticed me, when they said the king himself was coming to choose a mate from our pack, I ran. Silence fell, heavy and complete. For a moment I thought maybe I'd said too much, that he'd pull away, offended that I'd lumped him in with all the others, the alphas who took and called it destiny. Shame curled low in my belly, mixing with the heat until I felt sick. Then I heard it. His inhale, sharp and shaky, the slightest crack in the armor of his control. "Gods," he whispered. There was a roughness there I hadn't heard before, like glass grinding. "They did that in my name." He shifted, rolling me gently so I faced him fully. The movement made my head swim, but his hand on the back of my neck anchored me. Firelight carved his features into something fierce and grief-stricken. "I wondered," he said hoarsely, "why some packs were so eager to offer Omegas whenever I visited. They made it sound like honor, alliance. His jaw clenched, muscles jumping. I never saw the ceremonies, never saw what they called love. His thumb brushed along the line of my throat, hovering over the place where a mark might go, not pressing, just hovering. If I had known, he said, voice low and lethal, I would have burned their halls to the ground. I believed him. That was the terrifying part. You're still an alpha, I whispered. You still have teeth. His gaze snapped to mine. And you think I brought you here to use them on you? Isn't that what alphas do? The words slipped out, tired and bitter. Take what the bond gives and call it fate? For a long moment he was silent. The only sounds were the wind outside and the crackle of the fire. His eyes searched my face like he was memorizing every line. I won't pretend I don't feel it, he said at last. The bond, the pull. Every part of me wants to sink my teeth into your skin and never let go. His fingers tightened fractionally on my nape, like he was fighting his own instincts. But wanting is not the same as taking. Something in his voice made my chest ache. I realized, dimly, that his breathing was uneven, that the steady rock of him had shifted. Do you know what it's like, he continued, to rule for 20 years with half your soul missing? I blinked. Kingsley. Every council meeting, every battle, every winter ration decision. A humorless smile flickered over his mouth. Everyone sees the crown, the power. No one sees the emptiness underneath. He huffed out a breath. My wolf has been clawing at the walls of my mind since I came of age, howling for someone I'd never met. Every year that passed, I started to believe she didn't exist, that the moon had decided I was better off alone. His hand left my neck to cut my cheek instead, calloused palm warm and gentle against my fevered skin. His thumb brushed the corner of my mouth, so lightly I barely felt it. Do you know how many times I told myself you were a dream? He whispered. Some phantom scent my mind invented to keep me from going mad. My throat closed. I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I have stood on battlefields with blood up to my knees and felt nothing, he said. I have walked through cheering crowds and felt nothing. I have lain in this very bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the moon gave every fool in my court a mate, but left me with only my own thoughts. He swallowed hard. And then 5 years ago, he murmured, on a border patrol I should never have taken, I smelled you. The memory flashed in his gaze clear enough that I could almost see it. Snow, pines, a faint curl of scent under the bitter tang of wolfsbane. You were gone before I reached the clearing, he went on. All that was left was a cup that smelled like poison and moonlight. His thumb traced under my eye, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I have been chasing ghosts ever since. His voice broke on the last word. I'd thought of him as untouchable. A force of nature wrapped in armor and authority. Hearing that crack, seeing the raw honesty in his eyes, shook me more than any display of dominance ever could. I am tired, Mirabelle, he whispered. Tired of empty halls and colder beds. Tired of waking up reaching for someone who isn't there. His fingers slid back to cradle my jaw, tilting my face up to his. I don't want a pretty Omega to adorn my throne. I want you, the woman who poisoned herself to stay free, the wolf who ran rather than let anyone own her. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. The contact was soft, almost tentative, like he thought I might bolt even now. If you tell me to stop, he said, each word carefully spaced, I will. I'll build more walls, drink more wine, walk away from the scent that has haunted me for half a decade. I will let you go, even if it kills me. His breath shuddered out, warm against my lips. But please, don't run again. The plea in his voice shattered the last of my defenses. This man, this king, wasn't just an alpha with teeth. He was a lonely soul who had been reaching through the dark for mine without knowing if I truly existed. And now that I was here, shaking in his arms, he was asking, not demanding, not taking. My wolf lifted her head, eyes bright. This, she said softly, this is what we were made for. The bond between us pulsed then, a deep, resonant thrum that echoed through my bones. It felt like being caught in a current, dragged toward something vast and terrifying and beautiful. For the first time, I didn't push it away. I let myself feel it. His grief, his longing, his fierce, bewildering tenderness when he looked at me, the way his heart stuttered every time I winced. It all rushed through me in a dizzying wave. Tears slipped down my temples into his fingers. I'm scared, I whispered. I know, he said, voice shaking. So am I. That admission undid me completely. The words were there before I decided to speak them, rising up from some deep place where my wolf and I finally agreed. Kingsley. He drew in a breath like he was drowning. Yes? My lips trembled. I don't want to run anymore. His eyes flew open, gold blazing. The bond surged, tightening between us like a drawn bowstring. I'm not ready to be owned, I said, the last echo of my fear clinging stubbornly. His hand slid from my cheek to the side of my neck, fingers resting over my racing pulse. Not squeezing, just feeling. Then don't be, he murmured. Be mine. Not my possession. My mate. The firelight flickered, casting his features in shadow and flame. I realized, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that I believed him. Then, my voice came out as a breath. Take it. His brows knit. Mirabelle. The bond, I clarified, heart pounding. If you still want it. I swallowed hard. You have my permission. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. His chest went still. The world narrowed to the space between us, to the stunned, disbelieving wonder in his gaze. I could feel the exact moment the meaning of my words sank in. The air seemed to thicken, vibrating with something ancient and electric. The bond roared to life, no longer a muted tug but a rush of energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Say it again, he whispered. I'm yours, I said, voice shaking but sure. If you're mine. A sound left him then, low and raw, half growl, half broken prayer. His hand on my neck tightened just enough to make me aware of his strength, his thumb stroking soothing circles into my skin as if to apologize for the instinct. He leaned in, so close I could taste his breath, warm and faintly spiced. His gaze dropped to the place where my shoulder met my throat, the spot every Omega knew. Heat pooled there under his stare, my wolf rolling in anticipation. I won't mark you until you ask, he said, though his voice was ragged with strain. But, gods, Mirabelle, let me touch you. You're already touching me, I whispered. Not like this. Slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he dipped his head. His lips brushed the curve of my neck, feather-light, sending sparks racing down my spine. He didn't bite. He didn't even press. He just hovered there, breath ghosting over the sensitive skin where his mark would one day live. The bond thrummed, wild and alive, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. His mouth was a whisper against my pulse when he finally stopped, lips hovering just above the spot. Tell me when, Kingsley murmured, voice so soft I barely heard it over the roar of my own heartbeat. His lips stayed there, warm and waiting, and for the first time in my life, the choice was mine. The world held its breath with me. His lips hovered over the side of my neck, warm and barely there, like the ghost of a touch that might vanish if I moved too suddenly. My pulse fluttered wildly against his mouth, each frantic beat a question. Was I really going to let this happen? My wolf already knew the answer. She pressed forward, eyes bright, tail high, filling my chest with a fierce, aching yes. The fear was still there, old, stubborn, but it felt smaller now, drowned beneath something bigger. Trust, want, the quiet, trembling hope that this time would be different. Kingsley, I whispered. He made a low sound, half prayer, half plea. Say stop, he murmured, voice rough. Or say my name like that again and I won't have any more restraint left to give you. I swallowed, the movement brushing my throat against his lips. I don't want you restrained, I breathed. I want you honest. Silence hummed between us, heavy and electric. The bond thrummed in my bones like a distant drumbeat, waiting. Then tell me one last time, he said hoarsely. Mirabelle, do I have your permission? The last remnants of wolfsbane bitterness seemed to rise on my tongue, all those years of hiding and swallowing poison and calling it safety. I let them go on a single exhale. Yes. I felt him shudder. The change was subtle but undeniable. The tension that had lived in his body since the moment he walked through the door shifted, no longer a dam holding everything back but a tide rolling forward. He did not lunge. He did not pin. He simply surrendered. His lips pressed softly to my neck. Not a bite. A kiss. It was so gentle it hurt more than any teeth ever could. His mouth lingered over the spot where the mark would live, reverent, as if asking my skin itself for forgiveness. Warmth spread from that point outward, chasing the fever's sharp edges into something softer, hazier. My fingers found his shoulders, clutching at the leather and linen there. He was trembling. The Alpha King, the terror of the North, was shaking like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, willing himself to jump. Mine, he whispered against my skin, and the word wasn't a claim. It was a confession. The bond surged. I gasped as it flared to life, no longer a muted ache, but a blazing line drawn between us, soul to soul. For a heartbeat I saw through his eyes. The bed, the firelight, my body in his arms. I felt his awe, sharp and dizzying, and beneath it, a deep root of loneliness so old it had scarred. It punched the breath from my lungs. "You're not alone," I choked out, not sure if I said it aloud or through that strange new link between us. His hand slid into my hair, cradling my head, holding me steady. "Not anymore," he breathed. His teeth grazed my skin then, the lightest scrape, a warning of what was coming. Instinct made my body tense, a flicker of remembered fear. He felt it immediately. The hand at my waist tightened in reassurance, not restraint. "Look at me," he murmured. I turned my head, just enough to see his face. Firelight painted gold along the sharp lines of his cheekbones, caught in his eyes. They were wide open, vulnerable, every wall lowered. No crown, no throne, just a man terrified of breaking the only fragile thing he'd ever truly wanted. "If you flinch, I stop," he said. "If you pull away, I stop. If a single part of you doubts, I stop. Do you understand?" I did. That was the worst part. I understood that he was giving me absolute power over the one thing he craved most. My chest ached. "I'm done running," I whispered. "I want this. I want you." Something in him broke at that. He exhaled, a shaky, reverent sound, and bowed his head. The second his teeth sank into my skin, the universe shattered and remade itself in one blinding instant. Pain and pleasure collided, impossible to separate. Heat exploded from the mark outward, flooding my body with light. The bond roared, no longer a thread, but a river rushing through every part of me. Images, feelings, pieces of him tumbled into me in a dizzying torrent. A boy with too wide shoulders inheriting a crown too early. A young king standing alone at a window, watching couples below and pretending he didn't ache. Years of battle, duty, decisions made in cold rooms while his wolf paced and howled for someone he couldn't find. It was all there. His devotion, his brutality held carefully on a leash for my sake, his terror of failing me, his desperate, overwhelming need to wrap himself around me and keep the world out. I cried out, clutching him closer, nails digging into his back. Not to push him away, but to anchor myself as the bond locked into place with the finality of a snapped chain. "Mine," his wolf rumbled, the sound echoing inside my skull. "Ours," mine answered. The heat that had been tormenting me for hours shifted. It didn't disappear, but it changed, the raw, destructive edge smoothing into something steady and deep. The fever stopped feeling like it would devour me, and started feeling like a hearth hot, yes, but contained, shared. When he finally pulled his teeth from my skin, I was shaking. He stayed exactly where he was, mouth pressed gently to the fresh mark, his breath warm against the sting. One of his hands stroked slow lines down my back, soothing, grounding. The other came up to cup my face, thumb brushing away tears I hadn't noticed. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, voice raw. I laughed, a broken, hiccuping sound. "Yes," I whispered, "but not the way you think." His brows furrowed. I reached for his hand, threading our fingers together and pressing his palm to my cheek. "It hurts," I said, tears spilling freely now, because no one has ever been that careful with me. His expression crumpled. In the dancing firelight, the mighty Alpha King looked like a man on the verge of falling to pieces. He swallowed, throat working, and lifted his other hand to the mark. His fingertips traced the swollen shape with agonizing tenderness, following the curve as if memorizing it. "You're—" His voice failed, breaking on the word. He tried again, softer. "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Something in my chest finally gave way. The sob tore out of me before I could stop it. Not sharp with pain, but thick with a relief so profound it made me dizzy. All the years of swallowing poison, of hiding, of bracing for teeth and calling it fate, every moment of that weight slid off my shoulders in an invisible avalanche. He gathered me closer instantly, as if he could shield me even from my own emotions. my face pressed into the warm hollow of his neck, his scent enveloping me. I cried there, shaking in his arms, and he held me like he had all the time in the world. Easy, he whispered again and again, lips brushing my hair, my temple, the crown of my head. You're safe. You're safe with me. I swear it on my crown, on my wolf, on my life. No one will touch you without your consent. No one will use you. Not while I breathe. I believed him. That realization settled over me like a second mark, invisible but just as real. For the first time since I could remember, my body was on fire and I wasn't afraid. My heart was exposed and I wasn't ashamed. We lay like that for a long time, tangled in blankets and each other, listening to the storm die down outside. The fire burned lower, embers collapsing into a soft red glow. The bond hummed between us, a quiet, steady thrum, like the purr of a great beast finally at rest. At some point, exhaustion crept in, heavy and sweet. My fingers kept tracing idle patterns over his chest, mapping old scars, feeling the slow, reassuring beat of his heart under my palm. His hand stayed at the small of my back, thumb drawing circles that made my wolf sigh with contentment. "Mirabelle?" he murmured. No, thank you." My eyes fluttered open. "For what?" "For choosing me," he said simply. Heat bloomed in my cheeks, softer this time. "You make it sound like I had better options." His chest rumbled with a quiet laugh. "You did. You could have chosen to keep running." I thought about the snow, the empty cabins, the endless ache of being unseen. Then I thought about this, about warmth, and steady hands, and a bond that hummed like a promise instead of a cage. "Not anymore," I whispered. Outside, the first pale light of dawn crept through the frost-rimmed windows, turning the room silver at the edges. The storm had passed. In its place, a fragile, luminous stillness. Kingsley shifted just enough to see my face, his own softened by sleep and something gentler. He dipped his head and brushed a final, feather-light kiss over the new mark on my neck, sealing it not with pain now, but with reverence. The bond answered, a low, satisfied hum that vibrated through both of us. I closed my eyes, curled closer, and let the sound lull me under. For the first time in my life, dawn found me not alone and braced for survival, but tangled in my mate's arms, the universe quiet and the future wide open. For the first time, I felt safe. The palace felt colder than the storm. Not in temperature, the great stone halls were warmed by hidden fires and enchanted braziers, but in the way dozens of eyes slid over me as Kingsley led me through, his arm a solid band around my waist. Every step echoed, our footsteps swallowed by whispers that rose and fell like the rustle of dry leaves. "That's her. An Omega, the king's mate. She smells like..." Kingsley's fingers tightened fractionally at my hip each time the murmurs spiked, as if he could shield me from sound as easily as he shielded me from the world. His body heat pressed into my side, steady and grounding. I leaned into it, trying not to flinch under the weight of all that attention. "Breathe," he murmured near my ear, his voice for me alone. "They can look, they can gossip, they can choke on their own curiosity, but they do not touch you, ever." I nodded, though my throat was tight. My wolf bristled under my skin, torn between preening at the way he said "my" and wanting to bare her teeth at every noble who stared too long. We stopped before a tall door carved with crescent moons and stars. Kingsley knocked once, knuckles firm against the wood. "Enter," came a reedy voice from within. He guided me inside. The royal healer's chamber smelled of herbs and smoke, a sharp contrast to the polished stone outside. Glass vials lined the shelves, filled with liquids that shimmered faintly in strange colors. The healer himself was thin and gray, his hair a wispy halo around a face lined by time and too much knowledge. When he saw Kingsley, he bowed so low his nose nearly brushed the floor. Then his gaze flicked to me. I instinctively pressed closer to Kingsley's side. "This is my mate," Kingsley said, his tone brooking no argument. "I want her examined, quietly, thoroughly." The healer's brows rose, but he only nodded. "Of course, Your Majesty." His eyes shifted to me, hesitant. "If the Queen consents." The word queen made my stomach flip. I glanced up at Kingsley. "It's your choice," he said softly, golden eyes steady on mine. "No one touches you without it." Something eased in my chest at that. "All right," I whispered. "I consent." Kingsley kissed my temple, then moved just far enough away to give the healer room, though his presence still filled the small chamber like a storm held barely in check. The examination was clinical, careful. The healer checked my pulse, my eyes, the lingering warmth of the fading fever. He asked gentle questions about my heat, my cycles, the herbs I'd taken. I answered as best I could, cheeks burning, grateful that Kingsley stayed silent, though I could feel his gaze on me the entire time. Finally, the healer reached for a small silver dagger etched with runes. My body tensed. "Easy," he murmured. "Just a drop." He held up a shallow dish. "Moon-blessed lines react differently. Her Majesty wants to know exactly what you are, I presume." Kingsley's jaw tightened. "Her Majesty wants to know so she can protect her properly." I bit back a smile at the possessive edge in his voice. "Go ahead," I said, holding out my hand before I could overthink it. The dagger's point was sharp, but the cut was shallow, a quick sting across my fingertip. A single drop of my blood slid into the dish. The healer whispered something under his breath, words in a language older than the stone around us. The blood began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer, like light under water. Then it brightened, shifting from pale gold to a deep, luminous silver threaded with flecks of fire. The air in the room changed, charged with energy that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand on end. My wolf went utterly still, eyes wide. The healer gasped. He nearly dropped the dish, hands trembling. "Impossible," he whispered. It can't be." "What?" Kingsley's voice sharpened. The old man looked up, eyes wide and wet. When he spoke, his voice shook. "Moonfire." The word seemed to hang in the air, heavy and reverent. My brows knit. "What does that mean?" He stared at me like I'd sprouted wings. "Child, you are Moonfire born. That line was lost generations ago. We thought it myth at best, propaganda at worst." He swallowed. "Moonfire Omegas are sacred. Their bonds amplify an alpha's power. Their fertility is legendary. Entire dynasties were built on a single Moonfire pairing." My stomach lurched. I trailed off, suddenly cold. "Rare," he said simply. "And unimaginably valuable." Silence fell. I felt Kingsley's energy change before he moved. The air thickened, crackling with barely restrained fury. When I turned, his eyes were no longer soft amber but blazing molten gold. "Valuable," he repeated, each syllable like a stone dropping into a well. The healer seemed to realize his mistake. "I mean blessed, of course, my king. A gift from the moon. A bond like this could strengthen the entire kingdom. Your power, your line." Kingsley's hand shot out, shattering the edge of the wooden table with a single controlled strike. The crack of splintering wood made me jump. "Do not speak of her like she is a resource," he said, voice low and lethal. "She is not a breeding program. She is not a treaty. She is my mate." The healer bowed repeatedly, nearly tripping over his own feet. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect. This discovery will remain between us." "I swear it." Kingsley didn't look away from me. His fury wasn't aimed at me, but I could feel it, a protective storm rising on my behalf. "See that it does," he said coldly. "If I hear so much as a whisper of the word Moonfire outside this room, I will assume it came from your tongue." The healer paled. "It won't, on my life." We left soon after. Kingsley's hand found my waist again the moment we stepped back into the corridor, his grip firm, almost too tight. "Kingsley," I said quietly as we walked, "you're hurting me." His fingers loosened instantly. "I'm sorry," he exhaled through his nose, trying to rein himself in. Moonfire. Of course they'd turn it into a commodity." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Everyone." He shook his head, jaw clenched. "Alphas, elders, kings. The moment they learn what you are, you stop being a person and become an opportunity, an advantage, a prize." My stomach churned, like the girl in my old pack. His arm tightened around me again, gentler this time. "I will burn this kingdom to ash before I let them touch you," he said, no trace of exaggeration. "You are not a prize. You are mine." "And yours," I said softly, surprising both of us. Some of the tension eased from his shoulders. He looked down at me, something warm flickering in his eyes. "And mine," he agreed, voice quieter. That night, in his chambers, the world felt smaller. The room was large by any normal standard. High ceilings, heavy curtains, a bed big enough to swallow 3 people whole, but with the door closed and the fire low, it felt intimate, safe. Kingsley shrugged off his cloak and armor with jerky movements, like his muscles were still buzzing with leftover anger. I stood near the hearth, watching the flames dance, trying to arrange my thoughts around the word moonfire. "Come here," he said softly. I did. He wrapped his arms around me the moment I was within reach, pulling me against his bare chest. My cheek pressed to warm skin, ear over his heart. It beat hard and steady, faster than usual. "You are not their answer," he murmured into my hair. "You are not their salvation. You are not a vessel for anyone's ambition, including mine." "You said moonfire makes your power stronger," I said. "It does," he admitted. I could feel it the moment the bond snapped into place, like someone had been holding my strength underwater all these years, and finally let go. He kissed the top of my head. "But I will never use you for it. I swear that to you." Emotion stung behind my eyes. "You're allowed to benefit from me, you know," I said quietly. "That's what a bond is. We share." His hold on me tightened. "I don't want you to ever doubt the difference between sharing and being used." I tilted my head back to look at him. "Kingsley?" "Yes, little wolf. What happens if they find out what I am?" For the first time since I'd met him, he hesitated. "They'll want you," he said finally. "Every rival alpha, every power-hungry council. They'll dress it up as alliance and duty. They'll talk of heirs and legacies." His jaw flexed. "Which is why they won't find out. You can't hide me forever. I can try." A grim smile ghosted over his lips. "And if they force my hand, they'll learn what it means to threaten what's mine." Despite the fear coiling in my belly, a strange warmth bloomed there too. To be wanted like this, not as a thing, but as a person whose safety mattered more than politics, was dizzying. I slid my arms around his waist, holding him back. "You're not alone in this anymore," I reminded him. "Remember?" His expression softened. He bent his head to kiss me, slow and lingering, nothing to do with heat and everything to do with reassurance. "I remember," he said against my mouth. "I just wish the world would let us have a moment before it starts demanding pieces of you." A sharp knock on the door shattered the cocoon of quiet. Kingsley stiffened. "What?" "Forgive the hour, Your Majesty," came a muffled voice from the other side, but a sealed message just arrived from the Frostfang pack, marked urgent. Ice slid down my spine. Kingsley's gaze met mine, all softness gone, replaced by a lethal calm. "Bring it," he called. The door opened just enough for a hand to pass through a thick envelope, sealed with black wax bearing a familiar sigil, a snarling wolf's head I'd hoped never to see again. My former pack. My fingers went numb. Kingsley took the letter, dismissed the servant with a curt nod, and broke the seal. His eyes moved quickly over the lines, gold darkening with each word. By the time he reached the end, his hand was shaking. "What does it say?" I whispered. He folded the letter slowly, deliberately, like he was afraid he'd tear it in half if he moved too fast. "They know you're here," he said, voice dangerously calm. "They claim you as stolen property. They're demanding your return, or they march on my borders." The room seemed to tilt. "They can't." "They can try," he cut in, a growl curling under the words. I felt his control straining. The muscles in his arms bunched as he pulled me closer, almost crushing me to his chest. His heart pounded hard against my ribs, each beat a drum of barely leashed rage. "No one is taking you from me," Kingsley said, every word a vow. "Not your old pack, not this court, not anyone." His arms locked around me, protective to the point of pain. Through the bond, I felt the storm building inside him. Fear, fury, the savage urge to tear the world apart before it could reach me. For the first time, I realized the real danger might not be the threat outside these walls. It might be what this gentle, lonely, terrifying man would become if someone tried to take me away. The ballroom glittered like a trap. Light spilled from 100 chandeliers, catching on crystal and gold and the jeweled throats of nobles who had never once worried about surviving a winter. Music curled through the air, graceful and empty. At the center of it, I stood at Kingsley's side with his hand resting firmly at my waist, a dark stone in a sea of gems. "You don't have to stay long," he murmured, thumb drawing slow circles through the fabric of my dress. "We show our faces, then I steal you away." "You're the king," I whispered back. "You don't steal, You just leave. His lips brushed my temple, so quick I doubted anyone saw. Let them call it what they want. I'm counting the minutes. Nobles bowed as we passed, smiles sharp and assessing. Their gazes snagged on my hand resting over Kingsley's, on the faint mark at my neck, on the simple gown that couldn't quite hide I wasn't born to silk. Whispers followed us like a second music. That's her. An Omega from nowhere, they say. Kingsley's fingers tightened slightly at my hip each time the murmurs swelled. Breathe, he said quietly. They can't touch you. I nodded, though my stomach churned. My wolf paced under my skin, ears pricked, wary. She appeared near the high table, where the light hit hardest. Lady Seraphine moved through the crowd like a blade, sleek green silk, dark hair coiled in precise braids, emeralds winking at her throat. She was beautiful, the way marble statues are beautiful. Cold, perfect, meant to be admired from a distance. Your Majesty. She dipped into a flawless curtsy in front of Kingsley, eyes lowered just enough. The court rejoices to see you looking so content. His hand didn't leave my waist. Seraphine. Her gaze slid to me, slow and measuring. Something sharp flashed behind her polite smile. And this must be the Omega we've heard so much about. Mirabelle, Kingsley said. My mate. The words steadied me more than I expected. Lady Seraphine, I said, inclining my head. She studied me like I was a curiosity on a merchant's shelf. Forgive my surprise, she murmured. For years, the court has whispered about the kind of queen our king would choose. Alliances, ancient houses, powerful bloodlines. Her smile cooled. No one mentioned a stray from the borderlands. Stray. The word hit like a thrown stone. My wolf bristled immediately. Kingsley's grip tightened. Careful, he said softly. Seraphine's eyes glittered. I mean no offense, of course. I only speak what others wonder. The realm is unsettled. An untested Omega of uncertain origin suddenly standing where many of us were raised to stand, it raises questions. Questions like, why not you? I asked, before I could stop myself. A few fans stilled. Someone choked on a laugh and turned it into a cough. Color rose in Seraphine's cheeks. Some of us, she said, voice sweet with venom, have spent our lives preparing to serve this kingdom, to support our king, to bear heirs of unquestioned lineage. Instead, he brings home a girl no one has ever heard of, one who can barely curtsy, whose scent was suppressed so long people called her defective. The old word cut deep, sharp as ever. Defective. Broken. A mistake. I forced my chin up. Maybe the moon prefers surprises. Or maybe, she replied, our king has mistaken a heat-fevered stray for destiny. Her gaze swept me from head to toe. There is a difference between a queen and a passing comfort. The room seemed to tilt. Every insult I'd survived in the borderlands rose like ghosts. Stray, weak, wrong. My fingers curled in my skirt to keep from shaking. Kingsley moved before I could decide whether to speak or flee. He stepped in close behind me, chest to my back, his arm wrapping fully around my waist in a hold that was undeniably possessive. Heat bled through my dress, his scent wrapped around me like a shield. Enough, he said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the hall like a blade. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the musicians faltered before scrambling to keep playing softer. Seraphine lifted her chin. I only worry for the realm, Your Majesty. You insulted your queen, he replied, voice smooth and lethal. In my hall, at my table. The air went thinner. He lowered his mouth to my ear, but he pitched his voice, so the entire room heard every word. Listen carefully, he said. Mirabelle is not a stray. She is not a mistake. She is my mate. His hand splayed over my stomach, anchoring me. She is my queen, my heart, my everything. The last word trembled, bare and honest. A collective gasp rippled outward. I felt hundreds of eyes on us, but for a moment, there was only the two of us, and the bond humming between our ribs. The moon chose her for me, Kingsley continued, gaze sweeping the crowd. And I choose her. If anyone has a problem with that, they bring it to me, not to her, not with whispers, not with slurs. His shoulders squared. Am I understood? Heads bowed, some stiffly, some quick and terrified. Seraphine's jaw clenched so hard a vein pulsed in her temple. Of course, my king, she managed. Forgive my passion. I spoke out of concern. Speak less, he said flatly. He didn't wait for a reply. His arm stayed locked around me as he guided me out of the hall, the crowd peeling back, silent as parted water. My heart pounded. My palms were damp. The echo of my everything hung in my ears like a spell. We didn't stop until we reached a balcony high above the courtyard. The night air was cold and sharp, biting my overheated cheeks. Stars scattered across the sky. The music from the banquet drifted up, distant and muffled. Kingsley released me only to pace to the railing and brace his hands on the stone. For a long moment, he just breathed, shoulders tight. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked over, startled. "For what?" "For making things harder," I murmured. "For being the weakness they can see." His expression softened, then twisted. "You think that was your fault?" "She was right about one thing," I said. "I wasn't raised for this. I don't know the rules. I'm easy to provoke." "Seraphine has been preparing her entire life to look good while cutting people to pieces," he said. "That doesn't make her worthy of the crown. It makes her dangerous." He pushed off the railing and stepped toward me, eyes dark. "You did nothing wrong. You existed. That's all it took to show them where to aim." His honesty stung more than Seraphine's barbs. "And now they know exactly how to hurt you," I whispered. "Yes," he said simply. "You're my weak point, Mirabelle. They all saw it tonight." I swallowed. "You sound almost angry about that." "I'm angry at myself," he replied. "A good king is supposed to be unreadable, untouchable. You hit him. The crown doesn't so much as tilt." He gave a short, bitter laugh. "But I step between you and a few ugly words, and the whole court watches me bleed." "You cared," I said. "That's not bleeding. That's being alive." He searched my face, something breaking loose behind his eyes. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I don't know what I'll become if they ever take you from me. And men who don't know their own limits are dangerous." Fear slipped through the bond, sharp and raw. Not fear of our enemies, fear of himself. I closed the distance between us and set my palms on his chest. His heart thudded beneath my hands, strong and uneven. "Then we don't let them take me," I said. "Not the court, not my old pack, not their rumors or letters. You're not the only one here with teeth." His mouth twitched. "You think your teeth will scare a council of alphas? They'll scare the one who matters," I said. "You." His breath hitched. I rose on my toes, tugging lightly at the front of his shirt until he bent his head. I kissed him. It wasn't frantic or claiming. It was slow and certain, a quiet promise pressed to his mouth. He froze for a heartbeat, then softened, his hands sliding to my waist, fingers spreading as if to hold the whole of me steady. Through the bond, I felt his fear, his relief, his stunned gratitude. I poured my answer back, trust, stubborn loyalty, the simple truth that I was already choosing him, over and over. When we finally parted, his forehead rested against mine, breath warm in the cold night. "I'm terrified," he admitted, voice rough. "Of the court, of the frost fangs, of how much power you have over me without even trying." "Good," I said gently. "Be terrified. Just don't push me away because of it." "I don't know how to protect you without breaking myself open," he whispered. "Then break," I said. "I'll help you put the pieces back." A helpless laugh escaped him. "You're impossible. You chose me," I reminded him. "I did," he said. His grip on my waist tightened, steady and sure. "And I'll keep choosing you, even when it terrifies me." We stood there, wrapped in each other and the hum of the bond, while distant music drifted up and stars wheeled overhead. For a moment, the palace felt very far away. I didn't see the figure in the shadows of the archway at the end of the balcony, half hidden behind an ivy-draped pillar. I didn't see the way Seraphine's profile sharpened as she watched us, or how her fingers curled slowly around the stone, knuckles white. I only felt a faint prickle along my spine, as if the night itself had started paying closer attention. The garden always felt like the safest place in the palace. Lanterns hung from the branches like captive stars, their soft glow spilling over stone paths and late-blooming flowers. Music drifted from a quartet near the fountain, light and aimless. Nobles floated in tidy clusters, pretending they weren't watching the king and his new mate. Kingsley's hand rested at the small of my back, warm and steady. On my other side, his younger sister Ilara hooked her arm through mine. "They're staring less tonight," she whispered. "That's progress. Soon they'll be bored and move on to gossiping about each other again." "Can't wait," I murmured. She grinned, then sobered. If anyone is rude, point them out. I've always wanted to shove a lord into the koi pond. My wolf, lulled by Kingsley's closeness, stretched lazily. The bond hummed low and content between us. For a brief, fragile moment, it almost felt normal. The first warning was a sound that didn't belong. Not music, not laughter. A distant metallic clang, followed by a scream cut off too quickly. Kingsley went rigid. In the next heartbeat, the air changed. Shouts rose from the far wall, torches flared, shadows where no shadows should be moved fast and wrong. Guards barked orders, guests turned, confused. Inside, Kingsley said, already shifting his stance to shield us. Both of you. What's happening? Elara breathed. Attack. His eyes swept the garden, his hand tightened on my waist. They're here for Mirabelle. Cold slid down my spine. Frostfang. A nearby guard rushed over, sword already drawn. Your Majesty. Get them to the inner halls, Kingsley ordered. Do not let go of them. The guard nodded. Elara seized my hand, tugging me toward the nearest door. We'd barely taken 3 steps when a figure vaulted over the low wall in front of us. He wasn't alone. Men dropped into the lantern light, armor dark, movements quick and sure. A few shifted midair, landing as wolves with bared teeth, their scents sharp and unfamiliar. Panic flared through the crowd. Back! The guard snarled, planting himself between us and the intruders. Another man emerged from a side path, blocking our route to the door. He shifted as he walked, fur rippling back into skin, leaving a tall alpha with a scar down his jaw and a frostfang sigil burned into his forearm. His gaze locked on me. He smiled. There she is. Moonfire. My wolf snarled, ears flattening. Across the garden, power rolled like thunder. I turned in time to see Kingsley moving, cloak flaring, body already bending, twisting, bones stretched, black fur burst along his skin. In a rush of motion, he hit the ground not as a man, but as a massive wolf. So big he seemed to swallow the lantern light. The garden froze. Then he attacked. He was terrifyingly efficient. One moment, 2 frostfang wolves were charging a cluster of fleeing guests. The next, they were on the ground, throats torn, Kingsley spinning to face the next threat. He moved like he'd been born for this. Every leap perfect, every bite decisive. For a few seconds, awe overrode fear. Then more attackers poured over the wall behind us. Take the girl, someone shouted. The sister too, if you can. The guard in front of us cursed. Run, he hissed over his shoulder. Now. He lunged at the nearest wolf. Elara yanked on my hand, pulling me toward a narrower side path arched with vines. My skirts snagged on thorns as we ran. My breath burned in my chest. We were almost under the stone arch when a heavy shape dropped down right in front of us. He shifted as he landed, fur peeling back into skin, leaving an alpha with pale eyes and a cruel mouth. Another frostfang mark cut across his shoulder. Well, he drawled. The king's little miracle. Elara stepped in front of me. You won't touch her, he laughed. Brave. Useless, but brave. Behind us, more footsteps. I risked a glance back, 2 more men closing in, hemming us in on both sides. Across the garden, the black wolf's head snapped our way. Kingsley saw us. For a single suspended instant, his gaze took in everything. Elara braced in front of me, 3 enemies closing, the guard too far away, the chaos everywhere else. A blade slashed his flank. Blood spattered his fur. Through the bond, something tore. Rage hit me like a physical force. Cold, absolute, all-consuming. His control, careful, iron-tight, shuddered. He ran. One moment he was a blur on the far side of the lawn. The next, he was between us and the front attacker, a wall of snarling black fur. The air around him felt different now, wilder, like the world itself was holding its breath. The Frostfang Alpha grinned, unafraid. You can't guard both, King. One of them dies. Which one breaks you more? He lunged. Kingsley met him in an explosion of movement. This wasn't the precise, measured violence from before. This was something else, raw, unrestrained. He slammed the Alpha down so hard the earth shook, teeth driving deep, ripping and shaking until there was nothing left that could get up again. It was brutal, overkill, a message. My stomach flipped. I'd never seen him like this. Lost to the fight. More beast than man. Hands grabbed us from behind. One attacker wrapped an arm around Elara's neck. Another caught my wrist, yanking me backward. Kingsley! Alara cried, struggling. He wrenched his bloody muzzle up. If he'd been a storm before, now he was the eye cracking open. His gaze locked on the man dragging me, on Alara's white face, on my hand clawing at the fingers around my throat. His growl rolled low and dangerous, making my bones vibrate. He came at them like a falling star. We went down in a tangle. The man holding me tried to pivot, using me as a shield. Kingsley didn't slow. For an instant, I saw nothing but teeth and black fur and the gleam of his eyes. Fear stabbed through me, sharp as any blade. What if he didn't see me? What if, in this state, everything just looked like something to destroy? Kingsley, I thought wildly, not even sure if the word reached my mouth. The bond flared. He hit the attacker from the side, jaws clamping onto the man's shoulder instead of my arm. The impact tore me free. I tumbled into the grass, air punching from my lungs. When I looked up, it was to the sight of Kingsley standing over the fallen bodies, sides heaving, fur slicked with blood that wasn't all his. His head whipped around, searching, hunting for whatever else dared to move. His gaze crashed into mine. His eyes were blown wide, molten gold nearly swallowed by black. They were wild, feral, and then, slowly, familiar. Kingsley, I whispered, voice shaking. He froze. The snarl died mid-rumble, his ears pricked toward my voice. Through the bond, I felt confusion cut through the fury, a sharp, piercing thread of fear, not for himself, but for me. Carefully, ignoring the tremor in my limbs, I pushed myself up onto my knees and reached out. My fingers brushed the thick fur at his neck, burying into warmth. "It's me," I said softly. "I'm here. I'm safe. You did that." His whole body shuddered under my hand. The sounds of fighting were already fading, guards finishing what he'd started, but in that moment, the garden might as well have been empty. It was just us, a blood-streaked wolf, and the woman who'd watched him come apart. "Come back," I breathed. "Please." He dipped his huge head, pressing his muzzle briefly against my chest, a rough, desperate nudge that nearly knocked me over. The gesture was almost apologetic. I wrapped both arms around his neck, holding on like he was the one in danger of breaking. "Kingsley," I whispered again, into his fur, into the bond, into every shattered piece of him. "Come back to me." The throne room smelled like steel and fear. The attack moved from the garden to the very heart of the palace faster than anyone expected. By the time the last of the intruders were forced back, alarms were already ringing along the inner walls. We barely had a night to breathe before the Frostfangs made their next move. They didn't sneak this time. They came with banners and blades, ramming at the gates, howls echoing off stone. The court huddled in the great hall, eyes wide, ears pressed for news. I stood beside Kingsley and Alara on the dais, fingers twisted in the fabric of my dress, feeling the tension humming through him like a live wire. "They won't stop," Alara said quietly. "Not until they have her. Or they're broken." Kingsley's jaw clenched. "Then they break." A crash shook the doors. Guards braced spears under the heavy beams. The scent of enemy wolves seeped into the room, cold, metallic, wrong. My wolf prowled inside me, restless and uneasy, as if pacing along bars that no longer existed. I'd spent years caging her, poisoning her, pretending she was small. Tonight, that lie felt thinner than ever. The doors buckled. "Get the council to the lower passages," Kingsley barked. "Now." People scattered. Alara grabbed a sword from a fallen stand, knuckles white. "I'm not hiding," she said. Kingsley gave her a look that said he knew better than to waste time arguing. "Then stay behind me." The beam splintered. Frostfang wolves flooded the hall, some in fur, some half-shifted, all eyes burning with the same hungry intent. I caught glimpses of familiar tattoos, familiar cruel smirks, my old life crashing into my new. "Moonfire!" one howled, spotting me on the dais. "Take the king's prize." Kingsley's growl rolled through the hall, deep and lethal. He surged forward, half-shifting as he went, body stretching, fur tearing through skin. Alara slipped to his flank, blade ready. I should have been afraid for myself. Instead, my eyes locked on Alara. 3 wolves had broken off from the main rush, circling wide, fanning behind her. She saw 2, not the 3rd. Kingsley couldn't be everywhere, not even like this. He was already tearing through the front line, a dark blur of teeth and fury. If one of them reached her, something inside me snapped. All the years of swallowing pain, of drinking poison, of keeping my wolf small and quiet and safe, they rose like a tide. The bond with Kingsley pulsed, hot and frantic, tugging me forward. No more hiding. I stepped off the dais. "Mirabelle," someone shouted. I didn't answer. The air around me felt suddenly thin, sharp, like the world was holding its breath. My wolf surged against my skin, not in the gentle, distant way she had before, but like a storm finally finding open sky. "Let me," she urged. "Please." Fear clawed at my throat. Every horror story I'd heard about first shifts, bones breaking, minds shattering flashed through my head. But behind it all, I saw Alara's small form, back exposed, 3 wolves closing in. I made my choice. I stopped holding back. The pain was instant. It ripped through me like lightning, bending me double. My bones groaned, stretching, reshaping. Heat exploded along my spine, each vertebra a brand. My hands hit the stone, fingers curled, nails thickening, lengthening into claws. Voices blurred into noise. My dress tore. My skin stretched. My vision went white, then blindingly, painfully clear. I screamed. Or my wolf did. The sound wasn't human, it was a howl ripped from somewhere deep and ancient. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, freezing every moving body in the room for a heartbeat. When it ended, I wasn't on 2 legs anymore. I stood on 4. The world looked different, sharper, brighter. I saw every thread of fear in the air, tasted the metallic sting of enemy rage on my tongue. Lantern light struck my fur and bounced, reflecting in the wide eyes of those nearest. Gasps rippled through the hall. "Moonfire," someone breathed, reverent and terrified. I glanced down. My fur was a pale, luminous silver, tipped in soft gold at my paws and tail, as if I'd been dipped in dawn. Light clung to me, outlining each hair, making me glow in the dim hall. I was bigger than any Omega wolf I'd ever seen, nearly as large as Kingsley, my shoulders high, muscles thrumming with coiled strength. I barely had time to register it. Elara. The 3 wolves were almost on her. I moved. The stone floor flew beneath my paws, each stride effortless, powerful. I cut across the hall, angling toward her just as the 3rd attacker lunged. I hit him midair. We crashed in a tangle of fur and snarls. For a moment, all I knew was teeth and impact. Then instinct took over. I drove him down, jaws clamping around the back of his neck, my weight pinning him. He yelped, twisting, but I held him until he went limp. The other 2 turned on me. Omega, they thought, charging. Not prey, my wolf answered. They came from both sides. I ducked under the first swipe, feeling claws rake sparks off the floor where my head had just been. My body remembered things I'd never done, moving with a grace that felt borrowed from the moon itself. I twisted, jaws flashing, and one wolf stumbled back with a torn shoulder, blood spraying. The second barreled toward Alara instead, trying to slip past. She lifted her sword, face pale but steady. I leapt, landing between them, teeth bared. The Frostfang wolf skidded, momentum carrying him too close. My jaws closed around his foreleg. Bone cracked under my bite. He howled, collapsing. Alara pressed her back to mine, breath shaking. "Is that you?" she whispered. I huffed, nudging her calf. Her laugh was half hysteria, half exhilaration. "You're beautiful," she said. Absolutely terrifying, but beautiful. Around us, the tide had shifted. Kingsley, still in his massive black wolf form, had carved a path through the front ranks. Now, fighting side by side, our movements began to sync without thought. He lunged high, I swept low. He drove enemies toward me. I intercepted those who tried to circle behind him. The bond between us blazed. I felt his shock when he first saw me, the way it melted into something fierce and bright, pride, awe, a love so intense it made my chest ache even in this form. He'd spent years imagining me. Even he hadn't imagined this. Together, we pushed the Frostfangs back. They had come expecting a prize. Instead, they found a king whose control had teeth, and a queen who glowed like moonlight and fought like she'd been born in blood. At last, a horn sounded a sharp, retreating note. The remaining attackers broke away, snarling, dragging their wounded. Some shifted mid-run, scaling the walls with bare, bloody hands. Others limped through the shattered doors. Guards gave chase. Kingsley and I stood in the wreckage of the hall, stones slicked with blood, overturned tables, shattered glass chests heaving in unison. Alara leaned against a pillar, sword still in hand, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and savage joy. Slowly, my wolf's hackles lowered. Kingsley shifted first. Black fur rippled back into skin, leaving him kneeling on the broken stone, breathless, bare-chested, blood streaked across his arms and throat. His gaze found me instantly. For a heartbeat, we just stared. Then I let myself shift back. It hurt less this time, but it still felt like being pulled through myself, bones knitting into new shapes, fur withdrawing, light condensing. When it was done, I knelt in the torn remains of my dress, skin tingling, hair wild, breath coming hard. The hall was silent. Kingsley moved slowly, as if stunned. He crossed the space between us and sank to his knees in front of me, ignoring the cuts on his legs, the murmuring nobles, the blood at his feet. His eyes were full of awe. "Mirabelle," he said, voice hoarse. "Moonfire Queen." My throat tightened. He lifted a shaking hand, not touching until I nodded. Then his fingers brushed my cheek, reverent. "You're gods. You're beyond anything I ever dreamed." Tears pricked my eyes. "I'm not prey," I said softly. His mouth curved. "You never were." Days later, the coronation felt almost surreal. The throne room was filled again, this time with flowers instead of blood. Banners draped from the rafters, moon sigils stitched in silver thread. The court watched from below as I walked up the long carpet, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my palms. Kingsley stood at the top of the steps, dressed in black and deep green, crown glinting on his dark hair. His eyes never left mine. "Mirabelle," the high priest intoned, "do you accept the crown of the North, not as a chain, but as a promise to your people, to your mate, and to yourself?" I thought of poison cups and empty cabins, of garden lanterns and blood on stone, of a black wolf pressing his head into my chest like an apology, and a man dropping to his knees in awe of a girl who'd spent her life hiding. "I do," I said. Kingsley took the crown from the cushion and set it gently on my head. The metal was cool, heavy, and right. Then, to the shock of everyone in the hall, he turned to me and knelt. Gasps erupted. The king, kneeling to his queen, to his mate. He bowed his head, one hand over his heart. "Long live the Moonfire Queen," he said, voice ringing. "My equal. My better." Something inside me, long starved, finally bloomed. That night, in our chambers, the world grew small again. We lay tangled on the bed, the crown resting on a table nearby, forgotten. Kingsley held me close, one arm under my head, the other around my waist, as if to keep me from drifting anywhere, even in sleep. "You don't have to hide anymore," he whispered into my hair. I traced the line of his jaw with my fingertips, memorizing the softness there that only I ever saw. "I'm not hiding," I said. My fingers settled over his heart, feeling it beat steady and strong beneath my palm. "I'm home." The bond hummed, warm and sure, echoing the first night I'd stumbled into his lodge, terrified and burning. Back then, I'd thought the worst thing that could happen was being caught. Now, as I tucked myself closer into his arms, crownless and unafraid, I knew the truth. I couldn't hide from him anymore, and I didn't want to. If you've stayed with Mirabelle and Kingsley all the way here, rate this story from 1 to 10 and tell me in the comments which moment hit you the hardest.